Well, on behalf of the Ralph Vaughan Williams Society, it's my pleasure this time around to welcome Howard Griffiths, who speaks to me, I think, from Switzerland. Is that right, Howard? Are you
Absolutely.
there?
Yes, in Zurich. I live in Zurich. I've lived here since 1980. So I'm also half Swiss. But of course, I was born in Hastings. So yeah.
Absolutely so. And the reason for talking to you, which we'll come on to in a moment, is the intriguing fact that you are about in mid-November to conduct a performance of Vaughan Williams's Fifth Symphony with the Belgrade Philharmonic, actually in Belgrade, I think. Is it not, Howard? So
Absolutely.
that's the intriguing thing. But let's start with you say you were born in Hastings, so you were born in the heartland, and I'm wondering what Vaughan Williams meant to you as you were growing as a musician, as a youngster, even.
Absolutely. I mean, as a violinist, at that time I played the violin and I played a lot of his symphonies. You know, in England we have a tradition. We play a lot of English music. And my father then was director of music in Suffolk for the Suffolk Rural Music School. And through him and through his job, we met Benjamin Britten. I met Ursula Williams. I met the Waltons. So it was quite a time. And as a violinist, we played a lot of English music, and I played a lot of Vaughan Williams symphonies, probably most of them at that time. I came to conducting quite late. I was sort of in my early 30s when I really started to conduct professional orchestras. And then, of course, the first works I did were the Lark Ascending, which is an absolutely beautiful piece. I mean, it's incredible. And of course, the Thomas Tallis, Fantasia on Thomas Tallis. And in fact, I did that when I left my old orchestra, the Brandenburg State Symphony Orchestra, in 2018. And in my last concert, I insisted on doing that piece, and we did it in a beautiful Gothic church. And of course, the sound was just fabulous. I mean, I think a lot of people had tears in their eyes. That piece really makes you very emotional.
Well, has it? You mentioned that particular performance and your relationship with the Brandenburg Orchestra. Has it been difficult over all these years that you've been in Switzerland and working around Europe? Has it been difficult to persuade orchestras to schedule Vaughan Williams works?
It's not always easy. Let me tell you, the first time I did this particular symphony, was in Spain, in Asturias. And we did 2 or 3 performances at that time, and I was rather worried. I wondered how Spanish audiences, their fiery temperament, how they would take on Vaughan Williams' Fifth Symphony. It was amazing. At the end, there was absolute silence, and then bravos, euphoria, everything was we had a standing ovation in the end. And I mean, I think it's such an emotional symphony. It's like all 4 movements. I mean, even the scherzo, let's take a scherzo, which is normally a very lively movement. In this scherzo, it's rhythmically very, very intense, but there's only one big forte towards the end of the movement. And otherwise, everything's Midsummer Night Dream, you know, Mendelssohn Midsummer Night Dream style, everything very light. So it's a symphony that's quite introverted. Also, the other movements are quite introverted movements, but you go into an atmosphere. And I tend to talk to the audience before I play this piece and say, you're actually going to England now. If we're abroad, you're going to England and you're going to be part of very much English culture, but also the landscape, you know, not mountains. It's very gentle landscape. It's a little bit introverted, and the music actually works over you. You just go into another world. And I find this whole symphony.
Howard, did you have a problem scheduling it in Spain, in fact?
In Spain, not. No, they wanted it. They specifically asked me for that symphony. But in other places, I've had. It's not always easy to say I want to do Vaughan Williams. I remember with the Deutsche Radiophilharmonie, I did the London Symphony. And that I had to persuade them, please, you know, this is a great symphony, let's do it. And we did Scapio from Walton at the beginning. And often it's embedded in an English program. I think with English music, of course, In Belgrade, I'll do the Britain Serenade for tenor, horn, and strings in the first half with Ian Bostridge, and the second half we do Vaughan Williams 5. In other places, I've done it often with Scandinavian music. I think he wrote this symphony, he dedicated it to Sibelius without his permission, which I felt lovely. Obviously, he had a great respect for Sibelius' symphonies, and Sibelius, when he heard the symphony, he was really honored. He said, "This is such a great honor. This beautiful work has been dedicated to me." And I think there's a lot of affinity between Sibelius' symphonies and Vaughan Williams symphonies. There's a lot, probably not quoted, but the atmosphere is very.
Yeah, but what are the key arguments? I mean, you've referred to the Englishness of this music as if that's a selling point. Some people might say, well, that's going the wrong direction. What we want to say is this is mainstream European music rather than coming from a ghetto or something. What are the precise arguments that you make to these people who run orchestras who probably never heard some of these works before at all? What are the arguments?
Well, I think the arguments have to be that, firstly, this very good music and that audiences love it. I mean, whenever I've done this, I did it last season in Neubrandenburg, which is North Germany. We did 3 performances. And the first half, I did Tam-o-Shanter from Malcolm Arnold. And that's a complete contrast. And I said to the audience, look, now this is something, the opposite of what you've just heard. And this piece is... well, as I said before, I don't need to repeat myself on that, but the character of the music. But when I talk to orchestras, I sell it on that. This particular symphony is easier to sell because its orchestration is not so large. It's double wind, and 2 horns, and it's not a really big orchestra. Whereas some of the other symphonies are much bigger.
So, you having mentioned, I must ask you, having mentioned that you did the London Symphony, the London Symphony on one occasion, how that went down. In fact,
it went down very well as well. I mean, it's always very emotional, his music, and I find that's why we're conductors, why we're musicians, to evoke emotions amongst ourselves and pass it on to the audience. And I must say, orchestras love it. I think the first instance, they think, oh, not much happening here maybe at the beginning, but then they grow into it. And I think as a conductor, you really have to shape this music, probably more than some other music you do. You can do so much to shape the phrasing and bring out the important parts and evoke this atmosphere. It's in the music, but you can help.
Well, you mentioned talking to the audience, and it's always an intriguing question. And you've started to talk about how you're trying to get the orchestral musicians to play. It's always an intriguing thought as how much you simply treat it as music, and we play a bit longer here and a bit shorter there, a bit louder here and a bit softer there. How important is it for you to talk to an orchestra? Well, let's say, what will you be saying to the Belgrade Philharmonic as you introduce the Fifth Symphony to them? Will you talk about the background to the symphony?
Absolutely, definitely. I think with orchestras, you always have to be careful. Don't say too much at once, because then you turn them off. They stop listening. But if a very short introduction, and then during the work, during the rehearsals, then you add little bits of information as you go along. For example, in the romance, the text is, I wrote it, he has given me rest by his sorrow and life by his death. This is his theme from Pilgrim's Progress. And that I would explain to them, because, I mean, that explains the whole atmosphere of the movement. And of course, that this was written during the war years. Vaughan Williams was obviously active in the First World War. I think he wrote film music, and I think he drove a bus or something like that, and he said he drove it very badly. So
that's in the Great War, yes.
In the Great War, yes. In the Second World War, of course, yes. And of course, one loses friends, and it's a very sad time. War is something terrible, as we're also living today. And I think this overshadows this work very much. I mean, yeah, it impregnates the atmosphere of this symphony.
But here's the question. you give the context, you talk about Pilgrim's Progress, you talk about the background to war. I mean, you might talk about the relationship with Ursula, which is sort of developing at the time the symphony is coming to fruition. Can you say that it actually changes then the way that orchestral players play?
Definitely. You could really change that. And I think giving them an insight, for example, what I mentioned earlier about the scherzo, I would say, this is like it's played behind a curtain. It's like Midsummer Night's Dream, and orchestras love to play mezzo forte. They hate playing PPP, pianissimo, and that's one of my main challenges there, to really make sure it really sits really very piano. And the symphony as a whole, it's not extrovert, it's an introvert, but you still have to have this intensity, and we work at that. That's what this is the challenge for this symphony.
Yeah. Okay, you've been in Switzerland all this time. You, of course, did your formative years in the UK. You went to the Royal College of Music. So you are now seeped in the whole continental atmosphere yourself. But is it stupid to think that you might be inviting the Spanish orchestra and now the Belgrade orchestra to play in an, sounds like a cliche or what have you, an English sort of way? Or is there a Spanish Fifth Symphony and a Serbian Fifth Symphony?
Well, I think that all music and every piece you're playing has its own character. And I think it's according to the piece. I mean, Vaughan Williams' symphony itself, they are very different, and you interpret them differently. And the same with this symphony. And if you're interpreting Spanish music, we try and get the Spanish flavor out of the score. And that's our job as a conductor, that we try and make the sound and the ideas and the philosophy behind the work, we try and make that come to life, and not a general thing. Maybe that was in the past. We used to play Bach and Brahms and everybody with the same sort of brush over it, with lots of vibrato, everything. But I think now we are all much more sensitive to making a difference, how we interpret each work. And I take each work by itself.
But it must be intriguing each time you go to a new continental orchestra and play a Vaughan Williams work with them for the first time,
Yes.
to what it will actually sound like.
Yes, of course. In the beginning, I mean, I always try and take things from the orchestra when I'm first there. I let them play, and then we see what happens. I see what they offer me, but then I also have a concept in my mind. I know what sound I want and what I want to hear from the orchestra. So I impose then some of my ideas on the orchestra and try and make them play more in an English way, in a way. That's I'm going to be recording some Walton, the viola concerto, with BBC in Wales in a few weeks' time, and they will know that repertoire, and it'll just be there, because they know that repertoire, whereas an orchestra on the continent doesn't know this repertoire. So you're going to have to give them information, and you're going to have to help them understand the music.
Yeah. Okay. We've mentioned that you like to talk to audiences before conducting works like this. Is that a bit of a challenge in Serbia, or how?
No, I do it in English. I do that in English. I mean, I speak fluent German.
Yeah.
So in the German-speaking countries, there's no problem. But in Serbia, I do it in English, and they understand English. I mean, a lot of them understand English. I speak a little bit slower than I'm speaking to you now, so they really understand what I'm talking about. But I think they get the gist of what I'm trying to explain.
Yeah.
I tend not to use examples. I don't get the orchestra to play something. I just explain very shortly the essence of the piece.
So, more Vaughan Williams coming up? Have you got any in your diary that's coming up?
At the moment, not, but it'll come for certain. I've done those works I mentioned. I do the Fantasia on Thomas Tallis. I love doing that piece. That's and I think we have it slightly penciled in somewhere, but until it's concrete, I don't want to say anything about that. But I will sure do Vaughan Williams. I love the music.
Well, you mentioned Ian Bostridge is singing in the first half of this concert, the Britain Serenade for tenor, horn, and strings. And I'm wondering, is there a personal connection with him, in fact, that's led to him being there in Belgrade? It's intriguing.
No, it's actually the first time I'm working with him. I wanted to work with him when I was in Zurich, principal conductor in Zurich, and the dates just didn't work. And so I can't remember who did it then, but and I've always wanted to work with him. And I gave his name to the orchestra, and he's free, and so he's doing it. We're very happy he's doing that, because I mean, he's known the piece. I mean, I have to say, the Serenade is a piece I know backwards. I've done it many, many times, and I love doing Britain just as much as I love doing Vaughan Williams. And I think Britain respected Vaughan Williams immensely, and I think atmospheric-wise, they fit very well together. The Serenade, and it's also got a dark side to it, and I think the emotions are very, I won't say similar, but compatible at least. And yeah.
Well, look, Howard, thank you so much for your time. We wish you all the best for this performance of Vaughan Williams 5 on the 15th of November.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Go across from the UK, they've still got time to do that.
Absolutely.
Well, what we need is somebody in the audience to send a review to the Vaughan Williams Society Journal, so that we actually can reflect this in a second time, as it were, after the event.
I'll try and organize that. I'll do my best. And if not, if anybody would like to come, let me know. I can find you a ticket.
That's great stuff. Howard Griffiths, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for the interview.